Alright everybody, welcome to the first episode of Brandon Burning Food, a show where I'm going to basically teach y'all how to make good, easy recipes that anybody can make. I love cooking shows on YouTube, I watch them all the time, and I love the big name shows like, say, Binging with Babish, but one of the things I've noticed about those shows that have tons and tons of subscribers and every video gets 15 million views. I love those guys. They do great work, don't get me wrong, but a lot of their recipes are very involved, very expensive, and or require a lot of equipment, you know, sous vide, just stuff that an average person doesn't have in their kitchen. So my mission here is to show you guys kind of the other end of the spectrum, the simpler, more everyman style of cooking, and I promise you, just because it's simple doesn't mean it doesn't turn out good. In fact, a lot of the time it's the exact opposite. A lot of the time the simpler recipes are better. I have a friend who's a chef, and he has a saying, let the food do the work. So that's kind of what we're about here. So today, for first episode, I couldn't think of anything better to start this channel off with than pot roast in the slow cooker. So we have all of our ingredients here: our chuck roast, our gold potatoes, onions, garlic, baby carrots, and our brown gravy mix. We're going to prep all of this stuff before we put it in the crock pot. Prep is especially important for me just because I have the smallest residential kitchen I have ever seen in my life. So as you can see, I've got this makeshift work surface made out of a cooking sheet and a cutting board that I have laid my ingredients out on because I just don't have the room to do it anywhere else. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of go over the ingredients with y'all real quick, one at a time, and then I'll get to prepping everything off camera, and then I'll come back. First and foremost for our ingredients, we have our chuck roast. This is what's gonna turn into our pot roast. I like chuck roast because it's got nice, as you can see, it's got nice fat content to it, some good marbling. You want fat, but you don't want too much, because the last thing you want is for a roast that's mostly fat and then you get a minimal amount of meat out of it. This big vein especially, and down in here, these are all going to render during the cooking process. They're going to turn into liquid that is going to help to cook our vegetables. That being said, this is going to look a lot smaller when it's done. So you want to be careful and not get something with a ton of fat in it, because then you're going to go to scoop your meat and go for seconds and you're going to realize that you're almost out because most of your roast was fat. You can use eye of round and bottom round roast, as well as like rump roasts and stuff like that. I've done those before. They turn out well. The problem I have with them is they don't taste as good as the chuck, because the chuck has the fat content in it, and beef, fat equals flavor. And they also can come out kind of stringy. It's not bad, they still come out tender, but they come out a little stringy for me. It's just a personal preference thing. They are cheaper than chuck though, I will say that. This roast was about $9. The bottom round or eye of round equivalents to them would be more meat probably for the same price, or if you went for the same weight, you're probably looking at between $7 and $8. So it is cheaper, not a lot cheaper, but it is cheaper for those. But like I said, if you can get it, this is always your best bet. We are going to do a couple of things to this thing. First, we're going to season it with kosher salt, garlic powder, and black pepper. Now, I was supposed to get a black pepper grinder at the grocery store yesterday, but I was dumb and I forgot. So we're going to be using just this pre-ground black pepper. Now be careful with that. You can over pepper stuff with it because it is so fine. That's why I like the grinder. And it's the reason I use kosher salt, not table salt, to do this type of stuff. Table salt, really, if you're pre-seasoning meat, you should not use it. It is so fine and it's so powdery ground up that it's much easier to over salt your food with it than it is with kosher salt. Kosher salt has those big flakes and it gives it a nice deepening flavor to the meat, but it doesn't over salt it. Also, kosher salt works really well as a tenderizing agent for the meat, so especially with beef, if you can use kosher salt, do it, and if you're going to use table salt, be really careful. Finally, and then garlic powder. Garlic powder is garlic powder. And what you're going to want to do is pretty liberally season this thing. As you can see, this is not a small cut of meat. I mean, I have big hands, and this is at least the size of my hand and then some, and probably 3 times as thick. So you're going to want to really liberally season this thing. Obviously don't go insane and like encase the thing in salt, but definitely give it some love on all sides. That's important, not just top and bottom. You want to hit the edges too. So around here, underneath, on top, pat all the seasoning in, and then before we move on to the next step, we are going to let it rest for, I like to do it for about an hour. 20 minutes is the minimum though. You need to let it come to room temperature. That's very important with any cut of beef that you're cooking with. It needs to enter its cooking surface at room temperature. Very important. So I'm going to go ahead and get to seasoning this, and we'll see you guys in just a second. Alrighty, here we have our vegetable ingredients. We've got 1 yellow onion, 12 gold potatoes, a bag of baby carrots, and 5 cloves of garlic. I'm going to prep these by first cutting the potatoes into small, like-sized pieces. A good way to do this is to find kind of your smallest potatoes, like these guys, and then whatever you do with this one, everything else should be about the same size. So for this guy, he's small. I mean, he's about the size of a golf ball. I'm not going to do anything with him. So I now know that the rest of my potato pieces need to be about the size of this potato. So these bigger guys, probably just going to end up having to cut them in half. You want them similar size so all the potatoes come out cooked to the same doneness, basically. I use these gold potatoes or the red potatoes for this recipe. I don't think I've ever done it with russet potatoes. Russets, they're good for certain things, but an 8-hour cook time is just not something they hold up super well under. These are denser, they're waxier, which kind of sounds gross, but I promise it's not. And they just hold up to long cook times better. They come out less kind of grainy, I guess. Russets tend to just sort of fall apart into nothing after 8 hours. These will hold up. They'll be really, really tender, really smooth, almost buttery, but they will hold their structural integrity really well. A yellow onion right here. You're gonna want, depending on how much you like onions, you can go 1 to 2 of these. I'm gonna go 1 just because my fiance doesn't love onions, but you do want it in there for the aromatics of it all. Cut it or skin it, get this little root ball off, and quarter it or cut it into eighths. You don't want to mince it because it's gonna just disappear during the cook time. You want to give it some structure, so leave it in big chunks. And then the garlic, I was raised eating garlic. I believe that there's almost nothing that garlic doesn't make better, so you're going to be seeing a lot of garlic on this channel. I have 5 cloves here, and what we're going to do is we're going to skin them, crush them, and then cut them in half. Do not mince them. Mincing them will the flavor will still be there, but it won't be as hearty, it won't be as rich. It'll be more like as if you had sauteed the garlic rather than roasting it, which is what we're trying to do. Then the baby carrots, like I said, you don't have to do anything with these. You just have to open it and pour them out. So this is going to be what our roast rests on while it cooks once I'm done with it. So I'm going to prep everything and get back to you. Alrighty, as you can see, we got all of our root ingredients right here, the carrots, the potatoes, and the onion. The garlic is right here. I crushed it with the flat of this knife after skinning it. We're leaving it out of the main mixture because once this goes in the crock pot, that's going to go on top, along with a few other things that I have in the fridge that I haven't shown you yet, but I will soon. So yeah, this is pretty much good to sit. I am going to season it with some of our little trio right here. Not a ton, but I do want to get some seasoning on all layers of this dish. One of the things that I've noticed from watching some crockpots pot roast videos over the past week while I've been getting ready to make this is a lot of people throw all of their ingredients into their crockpot with no seasoning, especially this. Don't do that. It's not going to make the food inedible, obviously, but it is a small step that does make a huge difference. Layering your flavors by seasoning all your different ingredients does make a big difference at the end of the day. So just a little bit of salt, a little bit of black pepper, and a little bit of garlic powder into this thing. Toss it up and let it sit. As for this guy, he is still pretty cold to the touch. So like I said, you want it to be room temperature. You don't want to feel the chill of the meat when you're touching it before when we're getting ready to go to the next step, which I guess it'll probably be about 20 or 30 minutes for me. So I'm gonna go chill, sit on the couch, watch some TV for about a half an hour, and then come back and show you all the last step that we have to do before we get everything put together in this guy. So the roast is up to room temperature and we are ready to go for the last step before we put everything together in the crock pot. In this pan I have about a tablespoon and a half or so of hot oil. I use like cooking oil, I think it's vegetable oil. Don't use olive oil. You need to get this thing really hot. I have it on 8 on my stove, and olive oil smoke point is too low. It won't work. So as you can see, this is just starting to smoke. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get this into this for about 90 seconds aside. Once you put it in the pan, don't touch it. It's gonna make a lot of noise, and you don't get scared of what it's doing. You're not cooking it, you're not burning it, all you're doing is locking everything in. So just trust the process. Get it in the pan, don't touch it for a minute and a half, flip it, don't touch it for a minute and a half, and then you're actually gonna wanna sear the sides too. That takes a little less time, but it's a little bit more involved. You basically just have to hold it with the tongs and just on the pan. But unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to show you that on camera because, like I said, I don't have a stand, and I don't think I can do that one-handed. I need to hold the pot too. So I will make sure to do that on a future recipe when I do have a stand, just to demonstrate it. But if you don't feel comfortable with doing the sides, the top and the bottom are easy, and it's something's better than nothing, basically. So I'm gonna go ahead and take care of that, and then I will come back when it's time for us to do the very last thing, which is make our slow cooker liquid. Alright, here we got the roast in the pan searing. As you can see, it is making quite a bit of noise. Like I said, don't be afraid of it. That's supposed to happen. So I've probably got a little less than a minute left to go on this side. I'm going to flip it, do it for the same amount of time on the other side, which was 90 seconds. And then I'm going to do the edges of the brisket about 90 seconds per, depending on how they look when both of the major sides are being done. Here's the roast after being browned 90 seconds on all sides. You can see how it started to crisp up in some places. It's not as seared as I would have liked in some spots, but something's better than nothing. You don't have to worry about this like holding in juice. This is mostly for flavor. So it looks pretty good. I'm not going to mess with it too much. And as you can see, I mean, this thing is still like raw to the touch. What I did not just cook this at all. It just put a nice little brown crust on the outside, and more importantly, look at the pan. We've got a bunch of beef fond down in there now. So what we need to do, we need to let this guy chill for 10 minutes or so before he goes in the crock pot. He needs to cool down a bit. And then this is what we're going to use as the base for our slow cooker liquid. I need to let the pan cool before I do this, as well as the eye. So I'm going to give both of these probably 10 minutes, and then I'll come back and I'm going to deglaze this pan with beef stock. You don't want a lot of liquid in your slow cooker when this starts. That's one thing that I've seen a lot of people do, is add a ton of liquid into it before they even start cooking it. A lot of these ingredients are going to have their own liquid that they're going to sweat out during the cooking process. Potatoes, carrots, onions especially, as well as this roast with all that fat. So we don't want to go and put a ton of liquid into this thing before it even starts cooking. So what I usually do is about a cup of beef broth, maybe a cup and a half. This is kind of a bigger roast, so I'm thinking probably over a cup, but not quite a cup and a half. And then you just scrape the bottom of this with a wooden spoon while it bubbles. That's it. You just stir it up. All of these little lovely brown bits down here are going to add really nice deep flavors to the liquid that we're then going to braise the roast in, because that's essentially what slow cooking is. It's just a long braise. Alright, before we get down to business on the last step before we put everything in the crock pot, I want to show you guys the herbs I'm working with today, and I got these from a coworker. They're sage, rosemary, and oregano, is what she told me, although this smells like thyme. I don't know. Either way, they're going to add some really, really nice aromatic flavors to this dish. This is absolutely optional. I'm only doing it because I happen to have them in the fridge. If you don't have it around, it's not a big deal at all. But if you know somebody who is looking to get rid of some herbs, maybe they're pruning their bushes or something, or you have them yourself, definitely add this stuff. And you don't have to do anything to it. All you do is throw it in some on top of the vegetables and then some on top of the roast after it goes on top of the veggies, but I'll be showing you that soon. We are in the home stretch, guys, so I've got my crockpot liquid bubbling. I took about a little under 1.5 cups of beef broth, poured it in there, used this spatula, got a nice sharp flat blade on the front, and just scraped the bottom. Now I'm letting it come up to a simmer where I'm going to let it do so for about a minute before cutting the heat. And over here we've got the roast in the slow cooker, ready to go. I am going to lay some herbs over top of it, and I am also going to put some butter on top before we pour the liquid around it and add the final step, which is the gravy seasoning. But I'll take care of that in just a second and show you what it looks like when I'm done. So real quick, what I did was I made little X's of 2 of my herbs in 4 spots on top of the roast, and then I put a pat of butter on top to put them in place. Butter will slowly melt into the cooking herbs, flavoring the butter. It'll run all over the roast, and definitely will add some positive elements to the flavor of this thing, especially after 8 hours of basically self-basting. Here we go. This is the liquid going in. I'm going to try to do my best. Oh god. Okay, I think we're good. Wow, impressive. So we are ready to roll, guys. All I have to do is add the seasoning, pack it in, and I'll take care of that and show you what it's like when we're all finished. And that's done, ladies and gentlemen. We just have to put the lid on, which is over here. Bam. Lid on. Low. See you in 8.5 to 9 hours.